Hello YouTube and welcome to another video. The big stupid grin that you see on my face is because I am shooting this intro after working on the X2 all week, and I am extremely happy with the results. A few of you have pointed out that I am perhaps a little bit obsessive or a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to doing my work. And yeah, that might be true, but I think the results will speak for themselves. I have been quite worried that there would be some sort of an issue or, issues with the cosmetics or the appearance because of the fact that I literally chopped a big hole in the front of this thing and joined the front fill to the existing hull. Not only did I do that, but I went about it in a very unconventional way where the front fill was sitting on top of the hull in some places and then overlapping it in other places. The chines didn't line up from the front to the back. They were slightly offset, and there were kind of places where it was even and then other places where it wasn't. So for this to have turned out as well as it did, I am extremely happy. Let's just get into this video. It's going to be a long one. I'm kind of frustrated that I didn't film putting the thickened epoxy on in either of these areas because it was a perfect example of one of the places where you would want to use thickened epoxy. I also used it in a couple spaces, like here I filled in, there was a gouge through there and I filled that. I'm going to be filling a gouge over here with the thickened epoxy, and I also filled in this area. They were fairly shallow and all of the filling could be done with the thickened epoxy, which gives pretty decent strength and sands away fairly easily. The reason why I used the thickened epoxy in these areas is because the damage had broken all the way through to the foam core, and if I would have tried to just use the epoxy to lay fiberglass over these areas, it would have created a lot of inconsistencies and it would have made it full of air pockets and just very hard to lay the fiberglass on there flat. And so not only is this going to make it stronger, but it's also going to make it so that it's easier to finish the final product. So if I would have just laid lumpy fiberglass over the top of this, basically there would have been high spots and low spots in the patch, which would make it much more likely that I would have to do several kind of top coats over it. With the way it is now, it's going to be fairly easy to build it up with this glass, get the basic shape that I want, and then sand it down. I'll probably have to do a little bit of fill work, but it is definitely going to save a whole lot of trouble. I got all the spots filled in that I wanted to. I got this low spot, and then these two patches done. I think I'm going to have to do a little bit of fill work on this patch, probably in through this area and then along here once it's hardened up and I sand it down. This one I think has enough fill. I might have to build it up a little bit more through the center, but I'll just do that with thickened epoxy or maybe even the microspheres because this is the structural part of the repair. What I do after this will be basically just cosmetic stuff. And just like magic, it's all done. Or mostly done anyway. Turned out better than I thought it would. It took quite a bit of sanding. I ended up having to take a break in the middle of it and then coming back to it. But it turned out quite well. I thought there was going to be a low spot through the center. Turns out there's two tiny little low spots here and only one very small air pocket here. And then in this one, I knew this was going to happen, but yeah, there's a tiny air pocket along the front edge and then a tiny low spot through the center. These turned out good enough, so this little patch and this little patch, so I'm going to leave them just as they are. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm completely happy with the way this transitions through here. Part of the problem that I'm having is that this front fill naturally starts to drop off. some of you might remember that when I put this front fill on, I actually bolted it down to the hull. So I drilled through the hull and I used some thickened epoxy to hold it in place. And that's what this low spot here and this low spot here are actually holes where I had bolted it down. So the issue is that it kind of bulges up here, and then the hull kind of started sweeping forward from here. And so I've got kind of two, what do you call it, compound bends meeting each other. So it's a little bit tricky to get this just right. And I feel like this one is actually pretty good. The way that it comes through here, I feel like that is actually really good. But this one has a bit of a low spot through here, I think. I just got done applying another coat of the fairing compound, the epoxy mixed with the microspheres. And I did the repair over here that I said I was going to do. There was two small repairs there. And I also filled in, there was a low spot along here. And while I was looking at the hull, I noticed that along the center line here, what do you call that, a chine? Anyway, along here, it was a little bit low, so I built that up a little bit. I had some leftover material, and so I tried to put enough on here so that I can kind of shape that out the way that I want it. One of the next steps in this process or this project is going to be to color the whole bottom of it black so I can see where any high or low spots are, and so that it will hide any openings in the carbon fiber weave that I will be putting on soon. Anyway, I've been playing with the hood a little bit. The previous owners had cut the opening out. It was really jagged and gross looking. They had cut the opening out for the air intake, or they had cut an opening out for the air intake, and it was just all jagged and gross. They did it with a drill and just knocked it out with a hammer or something. So I redid the hole with a die grinder. The hole, yeah, let's just tip it up so you guys can see. So the second hole in was really bad, and it was bigger than this one, so I'm just going to cut it out to a square. Basically, I'm just going to follow the lines around the outside so that it still has support across the bottom here, but it's plenty big to allow the intake pipe to go through. And then that one was also cut out very jagged, so I recut that one. What I plan on doing with this is either using carbon fiber or fiberglass and just making a thin tube that goes in through here and then just epoxying it in place. It's the following day and this stuff has set up. I haven't tried to sand it yet, so I don't know if it's fully set up. Probably not. But I got a package today that I've been waiting for several months. I ordered this at the same time that I ordered the, what do you call it, jet trim. This is my seat cover. I ordered it so long ago that I'm not really sure what to expect. I know that there's some green and black and maybe some red stitching. Anyway, let's open it up and have a little look. And the seat cover. Let's see what this is. Sippy cups. 16-ounce mixing cups. I use the scale to measure everything by weight, or to mix by weight, so I don't need graduated cups and I save a lot of money this way. Oh yeah, I think this is the 3/8 line. The stuff I currently have is 1/4 inch. This stuff is 3/8. Alright, so what did I get? I got some 2-inch brushes because I was almost out, and some 1-inch brushes because I'm getting kind of low. I got more polypoxy. There is the polypoxy hardener, and then polypoxy resin. This one's taped together for some reason. So this is made by PTM&W. Because I don't want to get epoxy in the bed plate mounting holes or in the intake grate mounting holes, I am going to use these stainless steel bolts and put a little bit of, what do you call this, mold release wax on them. I'm not going to do anything fancy. I'm not going to polish it. I'm going to smear the wax on here quite generously. I'm going to be careful not to get this onto the surface of my fiberglass anywhere, because that will guarantee that the epoxy does not stick. Alright, I've mixed up a batch of epoxy. This stuff has about a 30 or 40 minute pot life, so it will give me lots of time to get it down. There is a timer for the stirring, so I'm ready to put it down. I mixed up 66 grams to get me started, and if that doesn't completely finish it, I'll have to mix up another batch. Alright, I'm going to try to capture some of this on time lapse. I've pulled as many hairs out of the brush as I could. I'm not going to put this on terribly thick. I think I already told you guys the pot life on this stuff is about 30 or 40 minutes, and that is both good and bad. The good part of that is it's going to allow it to flow out and kind of smooth out. The bad part of it is that it's going to be soft and tacky enough for several hours for bugs to get stuck in it. So, yeah, I imagine that I'm going to have to sand a bunch of bugs out. And as I say that, there's one flying around my arm. And there's also my cat that I have to deal with. So far, I guess it's going okay. The epoxy is doing some sort of weird thing. I saw it doing it the other day, and I thought maybe it was because I had microspheres mixed in with it to make the, what do you call it, fairing compound. But it appears as though it is just a characteristic of this epoxy. I just finished putting the last bit of epoxy on. It is 3:32 in the morning. I got a little bit of epoxy in my eye, so I gotta go flush that out, and then I gotta go to bed because I have some service calls to do tomorrow. I probably should have done one coat tonight and then one coat tomorrow sometime, but if I would have let it cure fully, then I would have had to sand it before applying more, and I've got service calls to do tomorrow, so I probably wouldn't have gotten back to it before it fully cured. Alright YouTube, it is the next day and this stuff has set up. I'm probably going to be able to wet sand it today. I accidentally left my camera recording time-lapse all night. It recorded a 28-minute time-lapse, so it might turn out that I need to add another coat. If I do need to add another coat, I won't be terribly disappointed, but I would like to just be able to add the carbon fiber right over the top of this. Before we go any further with this video, I wanted to take a moment to give a huge shout out to Jason from the Jet Ski Brothers. He recommended that I replace my key and carburetors with Mikuni's and then I wouldn't have any problems. Thanks so much for that great piece of advice, Jason. Much appreciated. But for real, I did want to say something, and that was that I've had a few people contacting me on Facebook and also people contacting me through Instagram. And I very rarely use Facebook or Instagram to communicate. I very rarely use Facebook full stop. I only check it, when I'm going on there to do something else. Sometimes I go on to promote one of my videos or something, but very rarely do I go on Facebook. So if you need to reach me for something, if you've got a question or a comment, just leave it in a comment section of one of these videos. And that's the most likely way that I will see it because I get notified about all the comments by email. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. It is now the following day. I have wet sanded this thing for about 12 hours straight to the point where I don't have any skin left on the tips of my fingers in a couple places. And so now it is time to put on a second coat of epoxy. I've got a couple of spots that are showing through. One here, which is basically just a high spot from the factory. And then along the chines, there's a few spots. I could just touch this up with paint, but I kind of want to put another coat of epoxy on it to test out the INFUSION epoxy that I got. You can see there's a little bit of a low area here, and along here, there's quite a high spot from the factory, or I guess high spot, low spot. So the white part is high, the black part is low, and this wasn't a damaged area. This wasn't anything that I repaired. This is just the way that it came from the factory. When it's painted white, I guess it's harder to see, but when you've got two different colors on there, it's easier to see the imperfections. So I am going to try to coat this now with my INFUSION epoxy. I'm hoping that the low viscosity is going to allow it to flow out nicely and hopefully give me a nice finish for laying the cloth over. I've got the doors and windows closed in here because when I put the first coat on, I had lots of moths and little bugs flying in and landing in my paint. I'm going to try to avoid that by keeping the windows and the doors shut. I have no idea what this stuff is going to smell like or if it's going to be very fumey, so we'll see what happens. You might be wondering why the lights are off and it's dark in here, and that's because I'm taking some preventative measures. The last time I applied epoxy to the hull, I had a huge number of bugs decide that they wanted to crash land onto my hull, and it really made for quite the mess. So what I've done, I've turned on the light over there so that if the bugs or whatever bugs are in here or come in here, they will hopefully fly over to that area and not over here. And I've also turned the light off over the door. Normally the bugs gather around the outside light, and then when I open the door, they either just get sucked in or they fly in because they see how bright it is in here. I was quite worried about this epoxy having runs because the viscosity of it is so low. I'm going to turn the light on now, and hopefully it's not a whole lot better. What I will do, I'll take the chance on it. I'm going to turn on the actual lights in the room so that you guys can get a better look at it. So let's just take a walk over to the lights here. Okay. So it is looking quite nice. There are little dust specks and stuff in it, but overall, I am extremely happy with the way it's turning out. It turns out that the best way to apply this stuff, as a paint anyway, is to roll it on with a roller and then go over it with a paintbrush. There are a few places where the epoxy went on fairly thin, but I'm not going to bother putting another coat on. I'm going to let this set up, and then I'm going to scuff it up very gently, and then the carbon fiber is going to be going on over the top of this. It is looking good enough now that I kind of feel like, yeah, I almost feel like maybe I should just put a couple more coats of epoxy on it, and then I could wet sand it, buff it, and just ride it like this for this year. But I know there are some people who are really excited to see the carbon fiber, and I am excited to see it myself. I've been talking about finishing this ski cosmetically for as long as I've had it, so I want to get this done and out of the way. Even if we don't do the top of it right away, at least I can get the bottom done, and that way you guys get to see what this carbon fiber will look like. It looks like the precautions that I took to keep the bugs off of the epoxy worked out really well. I had one bug get in it last night while it was wet, and I dug that bug out without doing any damage. This finish isn't perfect by any means. If I were using this as a finishing coat, what I would do is apply another coat directly over the top of it now. Then I would wait for that to fully cure. I would wet sand it, and then I would apply 2 more coats, wet sand and buff. But because I'm putting carbon fiber over the top of this, it doesn't have to be cosmetically perfect. If there's kind of little pinholes and kind of little pieces of dust and stuff that got stuck in it, that isn't going to show up on the final product. Once this is fully cured, I'm going to scuff it up just with some 120 grit sandpaper, and then I'm going to be applying the Super 71 tack adhesive. Before I actually apply the tack adhesive, what I'm going to do is very carefully cut out the carbon fiber and drape it over this to see exactly how it's going to sit on there. I'm quite nervous about this. I've never worked with this stuff before, but I'm hoping that it goes well. I know I've probably said it about 4 times throughout this video, but I am extremely happy with the way this hull turned out. There is no telltales of where the front meets the back. There are no signs, no features where you can kind of look at it and say, okay, there is where the seam is. It is, yeah. I'm not a fiberglass guy, but this is as close to perfect as you can get. I'm loving it. I hope it handles good. You guys are now completely up to date on the project. I've left a bunch of footage out for kind of 3 reasons. One reason is just to make this video a little bit shorter. The second reason is that I want it to be able to release it in a timely manner. And the third reason is that I've decided that I'm actually going to make a video dedicated to the carbon fiber skinning of the bottom of the hull. There's going to be a bunch of people that want to watch that process or just see that video. And so I didn't want to add all of that footage to this. You guys get the basic idea. I will be showing actually installing the cloth when it comes time. It's currently Saturday around 4 p.m. and I'm editing this video and getting ready to put the cloth down. Once I start exporting this video, I'm gonna cut the cloth out and get started on it. There's a couple other things I wanted to say. Oh yes, you guys probably noticed that I haven't done inside of the pump tunnel. This area is still white. Two reasons for that. The first reason being that I don't care too much about the cosmetics. The main reason why I'm not doing that, and Jason from Jet Ski Brothers kind of said something about this, I decided that I would tell you guys about it, so you can thank him for bringing this up. I plan on sometime, maybe, hopefully, putting a different pump in this as a project. So this project is far from done in many ways. I'm going to be putting a different impeller in this from Impros, but sometime down the road, perhaps this winter, perhaps, I don't know, 10 years from now, I have a pump that is from a 1100 ZXI, ZXI, I don't know how you say that. Yeah, there's a couple of really good posts on forums about people fitting bigger pumps to the X2, and everybody does it in a different way. There's one particular forum post on PWC Today where a guy modified the 1100 pump to fit into the X2 hull, and I quite enjoyed that. This project may never happen. If I put the Impros prop in there and it works exactly how I want to, then I might save the 1100 pump for a different project, or yeah, I don't know. This video has gone on for long enough, so I guess that's gonna do it for this one. I'm really excited, but also really nervous about the next step in this process, which is putting the carbon fiber down, so wish me luck. That is gonna do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.